G'day, mate. How you going? This is the real-life Home Alone tale. On one December morning, the Martins went on holiday to the Bahamas, and when they were ready and waiting at the airport, taking to each other and presuming their 10-year-old son Mark was with them. But the ugly truth was that Mark was still asleep. You see, they forgot to get Mark out of bed, so any noise he will hear, in his view, could be his parents waking him up to go to the Bahamas. The plane was ready for boarding, and the Martins entered the plane trying every one of their kids is with them, not knowing the truth about Mark. The mother decided to do a head count when the plane was taking off, and suddenly she started to panic when she realized that Mark wasn't on the plane. Mark eventually got up and eventually got into the kitchen, thinking he'll find his parents packing and getting ready for their holidays. But there was no one there, and he was scared because he was only 10, and the movie Home Alone, which was his favourite movie, was only make-believe, so he tried to not think of burglars. He might be a victim. Just going to roll this down a bit. So of kidnap or something like that. And he didn't want that to happen. So he went out to the garage and started to fiddle with his father's tools. And one fell down on his foot, and it left a big lump on his toe. As well as Mark was screaming because of the pain, Mark decided to catch the bus to the emergency room to get his toe looked at. And then he looked at the timetable, and the bus was due for another hour, so he decided to use the emergency money to get a taxi to the hospital. But he has turned off that idea when he asked the price of the trip, so he rang up random numbers in the phone book to get them to help, but most people didn't trust him or each other. But that didn't stop him leaving a message on a various answering machine around the city. Various answering machines around the city. The only reply came about 2 hours later when Mick Doman rang, but he didn't say his name because he was planning to abduct Mark Martin and keep him tied up in his shed, and planned one day to chop his head off and then feed his dead body to the sharks. And Mark Martin wasn't strong enough to get away, so Mick came over and said he'll agree to take him to the emergency room if he promises to be a good boy. And then maybe after he'll take him back to the house for a lovely gelato that he could make himself. Mark said this is better than Home Alone. He fought criminals, and I have a lonely man sharing his belongings with me. He thought this was so radical. Mick didn't want to go to the emergency room, so he just took him to his place to start this evil deed. And Mark Martin still thought this man was nice. They got to his house, and Mark said, "My toe is still killing me. Why aren't I at the emergency room?" And Mick said, "I say a lot of things, and this time I say, I have just kidnapped you, Mark Martin, and I am going to tie you up and lock you in my shed. And then one day, unknown to you, I will take your pain away when I get my axe and chop your head off and feed your dead body to the sharks." Mark was scared, thinking he was the only boy in town that was invincible enough to avoid being abducted, particularly when his parents warned him about all that. Mick kept going outside to sharpen his axe, for the big kill, and Mark saw him through the crack in his shed. But he didn't see much because he had his body tied tightly with the ropes. And he was very scared. Mick knew that the worst thing he could do is abduct another kid, because then there would be a fight on, and he didn't want that. He just wanted to kill each of these rugrats one by one, and he wanted to get away with it. Mark was struggling so hard to break his body out of the ropes, but the ropes wouldn't budge, and he was thinking that he had finally been kidnapped, and every moment in his short life was coming back to him, like he was like his first bully episode, where the bully's older brother tried to knock him in the car and drive him over the edge. But that never worked, because Mark was the type of kid to say that you can never catch me. And now he thinks they finally have him where they want him. Mick went outside to sharpen his axe every 5 minutes, and Mark thinks that this doom is getting closer. Doomsday. Meanwhile, on the plane, Mark's family arrived in the Bahamas, ready to book a flight home when Mark didn't answer the phone call she made. The family were very worried, but they weren't expecting that Mark was facing his doom. They just figured the better option of just falling down somewhere. And too injured to pick up the phone. Eventually the Martins got home, and there was no sign of Mark anywhere. His two brothers checked the garage, and they couldn't find him anywhere. And his sister checked the attic, and there was no sign of Mark. But there was a phone, which was off the hook. And when she was putting the phone on the hook, she had a listen, and to her surprise, he didn't hang up the call he made to Mark. Mark's sister was hearing the evil voice saying that Mark Martin will die tonight at 7 p.m. and there will be no one around to save him, because I warn you that I will have a gun in his back and a knife will be placed on his neck if I get my way. Mark's sister, Emily, was very scared, and she didn't say anything to the man. But she ran down the stairs and told her parents, thinking he doesn't know that she heard, so the police could catch him before the moment. The parents showed the call to the police, and they did their best to try to trace the call, and they eventually found out that it was coming from the city, about 25 kilometres away from the Martins. The police tried to get there as quickly and quietly as they could, and so he doesn't make any sudden moves on his victim. When they got to the house, they saw a man sharpening his axe, and they had nothing on him. And they rang the police, and they tried to get a warrant to search the property to find evidence of Mark, dead or alive. When they got the warrant, they searched high and low with no signs of Mark anywhere, and they were thinking to themselves that this was a hoax, until Mark was looking outside, tied up tightly, seeing the police are out there, and he decided to struggle enough to make a noise so the police could hear him, but they couldn't hear anything until one of the police noticed a sound that was coming out of the shed, but they couldn't prove, so they radioed into base to get permission to break open the shed, thinking it might have the answer. of what happened to Mark Martin. They got the permission and from their boss and broke their door and saw the 10-year-old boy tied up in there. And then it took the police about 1 hour to untie him, and they asked him his name, and it matched the missing boy. While they were rescuing Mark, Mick got away, thinking he will never get caught by the police, decided to radio in that Mick was nowhere to be seen, and they were going to return Mark to the Martins. And about 5 hours later, after a high-speed chase with Mick Doman, eventually he was caught and brought into custody. And about 4 months later, he was sentenced to life imprisonment without any sign of parole. But he could get a bit after about 20 years if he's really good. And everyone breathed a sigh of relief, knowing that this child killer is behind bars for good. And mind you, prison was awful for Mick Doman. He was getting bashed every day, because you get bashed if you do anything to children in this world. Okay, thank you. Bye.